kindness from people who should have been his enemies. Abraham experienced joy because his wife gave birth to the promised son Isaac when Abraham was 100 and she was 90 years old. Abraham experienced joy in the journey because when he took that promised son Isaac up to Mount Moriah at the command of the Lord, he looked over, even though he thought he was going to sacrifice him, he looked over into a bush and saw a ram that was caught in the thicket, understanding that God had provided the ram as a substitute for his son, so he would not have to slay his son, but instead he would be able to use that ram and put him on the altar, and God would receive it as an acceptable sacrifice. I wonder, is there anybody in here who has lived long enough in your life to know that you may not see everything that has been promised, but there is still a reason why you ought to finish the journey. There is still good reason to keep going with God. There is still good reason to keep walking with God. There is still good reason to keep trusting God. There is still good reason to keep believing on God, because even though there are some things that you'll have to find out when you get to heaven, even while you are down here on this earth, God is going to give you joy that is unspeakable. God is going to give you love that is unconditional. God is going to give you hope that cannot be dashed. God is going to give you answers that has not been provided before. I wonder, is there anybody in here who has lived long enough to know that God does what he does even when you are in the midst of going through a crisis, even when you're in the midst of experiencing trouble, even when you're in the midst of financial breakdown, even when you're in the midst of sickness and dangerous health, even when you're in the midst of feeling like your relationship is going to break up, even when you're in the midst of feeling like your life is going to fall apart, there is still joy in the journey, because what God does is he keeps providing himself to you. That's the blessing of the covenant. That's the blessing of Abraham. That's the blessing of having faith, is that God keeps showing up and giving you himself. Is there anybody in the room that can just thank God that he doesn't just give you cars, clothes, and money? No, what he does is he says, I'm going to give you cars, clothes, and money, but greater than that is I'm going to give you the power of my spirit. I'm going to give you the power of my love.